You're touching on something which is a very central theme of your book, and that is that we live in a world that is infected with evil. Unpack that just a little bit. What is evil? Where did it come from? What are the implications in terms of the kind of world we live in?
Well, you go back to those early chapters of Scripture in Genesis 1 and 2, you got this perfect world and all's going well. We talked about some of that last night. And then you get into chapter 3, and you have the first sin that enters the human race. And that's immediately followed by the curse that comes down upon humanity and the world itself, which is put under the dominion of humanity. So the man and woman fall, and all creation falls under them and becomes subject to death and the suffering that ultimately leads to death. Now, at first we think, well, why is all this suffering necessary? Well, in the day you eat thereof, you shall surely die, meaning death will begin. Not that it will end, because that would have been the end of all humanity. Adam and Eve never would have had children if they were struck dead immediately and completely on the spot. But the process of dying began, and the suffering that comes with that. I think one of the things that we've got to do when it comes to a biblical understanding of suffering is to connect it back to the sin that caused it, but not view each individual case of suffering as a direct cause of a certain sin in that person's life. That's what Jesus was correcting in John 9 with the man born blind. And the disciples say, "Who sinned, Lord, this man or his father, that he would be born like this?" He says, well, it's not about any particular sin. Of course, all are sinners. He's a sinner. His parents are sinners. But this disease is not about any specific sin on their part. I mean, you can be the most righteous person on the planet and undergo severe suffering. Make you think of a book of the Bible? Yeah. Job. Yeah, this is a guy who is declared to be the most righteous man on earth, and he suffers worse than anybody. Okay, I mean, if that doesn't reiterate for us the fact that suffering comes into the life of the believer, I don't know what else will. But what we've got to do is realize that the fall, the curse, sin in the world is a temporary condition. Now, in order to live with the right worldview today, to have the right perspective, to have an eternal perspective today, you need to realize the beginning of the story and the end of the story, the end without end, the end that will go on forever, as C.S. Lewis says at the end of the Chronicles of Narnia, in which every chapter is better than the one before. That's the eternity that awaits us. Now, if you believe the beginning, God created the world good, He intended all to be well, sin and suffering were not part of the original creation, and you believe the end of the story without end that goes on, that Christ will redeem the world, and that we as His children, those of us who know Jesus Christ, will live without disease, without sin forever, then now you and I live in the middle of the story, right? We live in the part of the story where stuff goes wrong. Stuff goes bad. Have you noticed that? I've written a number of novels, and there's a way you write a novel. A good novel will be written with a beginning that has some state of affairs that's reasonably good and stable, and then in the middle of the story, or even fairly early in the story, things go wrong. Then there's, at the end of the story, what's called the resolution, where even in a story that's set here in this world, it's not the ultimate resolution of eternity, but it's where certain things come together that, not all novels are this way, but that leave you with a good sense of a feeling that maybe there was a purpose and some things have been accomplished and this person escapes this or overcomes this. But in the middle of the story, if the characters in my novels were real, and they had a choice, they'd say, "Randy, I want to walk off the pages of this book. You are putting me through hell. You're putting me through suffering. Okay, but they don't know what I know as an author. I'm going to pull this thing together, and in the end, there's going to be purpose. Well, God is the author of the great story. And that doesn't mean the suffering isn't real. It is real, but it does mean keep in mind the big picture from beginning to end so that then you can see, you can take the blinders off and see with peripheral vision and go, yeah, Lord, you've got a higher purpose for this.